Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Well, let's introduce our first guest of the programme today. He was with us back in February, very early February, about a month ago. Delighted that he's come back on the programme. As I mentioned at the top of the programme, he's an economist, a journalist, former foreign correspondent, and, importantly, he was a former finance ministry spokesman. In fact, he worked under Yanis Varoufakis. Let's welcome back to the show Dimitris Yannopoulos. Dimitris, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Richie. I'm very pleased to speak to you.
Thanks for doing it. So does it matter then? So Varoufakis says we want this legal opinion that might show that everything that was done to the Greeks and, you know, was illegal, and that the bank was advised not to treat the Greeks like this. Does that matter today?
Well, let's say that it matters in a sense, because a lot of people, friends of mine, telling me that Yanis Varoufakis is going into another publicity stunt, that this guy can't bear to remain out of the limelight since he exiled himself from Greece, which is a detail that nobody has mentioned before, right? I mean, after he resigned from the government, he didn't stay on to campaign and run against Tsipras, for instance, right? But he left in order to launch a European campaign to save Europe, to save the Eurozone and the European Union from disintegrating. That's supposed to be the purpose of his DiEM25 movement. And he clothes this new targeted campaign for EU transparency in the narrative of the X-Files. You know, deep in the vault of the headquarters of the European Central Bank lie the Greek files, a legal opinion about the ECB's role in snuffing out the Athens Spring in 2015. Now, that is the kind of Varoufakis communication fireworks. But behind that, it's not just a stunt. I think it's a very clever move, a political diversion, probably conceived and orchestrated in collusion with the ECB itself. And the aim is to shift the focus of European politics away from the consequences of the criminal actions by the ruling financial elites of the Eurozone and the European Union, and thus to trivialize these consequences as just a problem of transparency in the decision-making of EU institutions, and paramount among them being, of course, the European Central Bank, the most powerful of all Eurozone institutions, and the virtual enforcer of these policies, destructive policies of austerity, which have decimated millions of households in Europe. You know, Ireland, you know, Portugal, Spain, Italy, Greece, even France has suffered under the pressure of the ECB threatening to cut liquidity from from the banks of the countries concerned if they don't comply with the requirements of the German-led austerity policy. And Greece is also used as a scarecrow to discipline the other countries, saying that, look, if you don't comply quickly with the policies that we are prescribing, sooner or later you're going to end up like Greece, and make sure that you have the same kind of punishment.
It's a warning, right, Dimitris? It's a warning to everybody else. This is what happens if you don't toe the line.
Yes, what is happening in Greece is an economic genocide. I said it before, I say it again. There is no economic rationality. And the funny thing is, of course, it's not funny, but it's tragic, is that since 2013 at least, the Troika, headed by the IMF, has admitted being responsible for all these destruction of the foundations of the Greek economy, the breaking of the back of the middle class, the mass unemployment, the flight of educated youth away to Europe. 700,000 young people in a population of 10 million have left the country.
The future, basically, the brightest and the best of the Greeks have gone out of the country. We're seeing it in Ireland as well. The future of the country,
and it's a phenomenon that's combined. You see, there is a very complicated strategy of the globalists in Europe. It's difficult to disaggregate all the different elements which are mobilized in the imposition of this globalist agenda, because ultimately the aim, in my opinion, is to destroy the nation states and to weaken the control which people exercise in their respective society, to turn them into a mass of individuals divided into different regions in the model of the feudal Europe of the 10th, 11th century. So this situation combines, on the one hand, the move of educated labor from the south of Europe to the north, and at the same time, the forced injection of these flows of refugees from the countries of the Middle East and Northern Africa that have already been destroyed as part of the campaign of Hillary Clinton, if you remember. I mean, it was all part of the plan, because Soros and Hillary Clinton and Obama are the three, if you like, public figureheads of this globalist agenda. And they're still very active since Soros has issued this ultimatum to Trump that, that I'm going to overthrow you as quickly as I can, and we'll do everything we can to bring back the U.S. on the path of its global policeman role.
Dimitris, do you know what I can't understand? And I wanted to say this to you last time we spoke. I'm delighted you're back on the programme. Folks, if you're just tuning in, the former spokesman at the Greek Finance Ministry, the journalist and writer Dimitris Yannopoulos is on the line. This is vital stuff, this. Dimitris, I'll tell you this. When I was looking at this a few years ago, I had a dream, right? I actually had a fantasy. And that was, I used to say, because I came from a background where when I was younger, very young, there was money in my household. Then there was a long period where we had nothing. And we understood what it was like to be on the breadline, to be struggling. I used to think poor people are accustomed to being screwed. They've always gotten screwed, no matter, through the ages, through the millennia, poor people have gotten screwed. But middle class people or middle income people, they always kind of propped up the system, because they always had enough to get by. They had their children, they were able to get their children into schools, and they were just about able to get by in their lives. Now, my fantasy was, when the middle income people got screwed, there would be a revolution. And what we've seen for the last 5 years is middle income people getting screwed, but there's no revolution. Why are Greek people not, and I don't mean looting and causing violence and burning buildings. Why are they not getting up? Why are the Irish people, the middle income people, not standing up to this? Why? In your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, you probably heard of an experiment in 1961 called the Milgram experiment. That's an experiment where the test subjects are forced to gradually submit to higher levels of pain and accepting this pain as a normal situation. It's like a frog boiling in a kettle for a very long time until he boils to death.
Yeah.
Right? He getting all warm very slowly until he can't move and he dies of the heat. And it's the same thing with the Greek experiment, because the Greek people have been, over the last 8 years, so terrorized by this Troika regime. Every now and then, or rather every day almost, they hear of new measures, new cuts in public services, in pensions, in wages, in employment, in privatization of public transport or different ports, etc. And they can't stop and think, hey, what's happening to me? Is that normal? Is that legal? Am I a member of the European Union, or am I a country that has been defeated in some war that it has never fought and is now suffering the punishment from the victors of that war? Because that's what the situation of Greece is at the moment. It's an occupied country, and it's a country that everybody else in Europe fears the prospect of coming closer
Greece.
to its predicament.
Yeah.
And so the middle class, I believe a big section of the middle class is that has suffered from the austerity of the previous years up to 2014 is the social category that supported Tsipras and the Syriza left. Most of them are not leftists. They were not leftists, but they saw Tsipras as their only hope. Syriza, Tsipras and Varoufakis as their only hope, because that's what they promised. They didn't promise some socialist paradise. They didn't even promise a change in the economic makeup of the country. All they promised is getting out of the MOUs, this Troika system of control and enforcement of disastrous measures. And in the 5 months in which Varoufakis was at the finance minister, this hope, this determination waned until it was given its last chance with the referendum. Now, the referendum came out against the Troika, 62%.
That's right, a massive landslide that, yeah.
A massive landslide, which
Yeah.
neither Varoufakis nor Tsipras expected. In fact, both of them were in a bit of a state of panic over this result until Merkel came out that night and told them on the phone that, look, if you want to speak to me again about finding some kind of compromise, it's going to be difficult, but I'm telling you right now, you want to get rid of Varoufakis. We don't want to see him anywhere else in Brussels, Berlin again.
And she was wearing. That's
why Varoufakis resigned. It wasn't about retaliation, about measures that Tsipras had refused, or things like that. These are all stories that he has
invented
during the course of his exile. But the truth is that he, together with Tsipras, were pleading with the Troika until the last minute, please give us 5 days to have the referendum, to lose the referendum since we have been forced to shut down our banks, right? And the people would be leave it against us. And so you can do anything you want after that. But the people disappointed that.
Dimitris, let me just jump in there.
I don't believe in the pessimistic view of social movements at the moment. Society is moving in one direction that is currently confronting globalism for the first time in the history of at least a century, without any hesitation, but it's doing so in a very conservative and subdued way, one which the globalists can't use against it.
Well, let's talk about that in a second. Let's park that for 1 second. It's 18 minutes to the top of the hour. Dimitris Yannopoulos is on the line, former spokesman for the Greek Finance Ministry. Listen, I'm not trying to score a few points here or to be dramatic. I'm not an economist, but I used to present financial reports in mainstream radio. I understand finance up to a point. I understand the terminology. What I would have done if I was Alexis Tsipras, I would have called the cabinet around me and I would have said to my cabinet, I would have said, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell Merkel and the Troika, excuse my language, but we're past the watershed. I'm going to tell them to fuck off. And then I'm going to phone the mint and I'm going to get them to start printing the drachma and minting coins. And tomorrow I'm going to go on national television and I'm going to look my countrymen and women in the eye and I'm going to tell them the truth about what has been done to Greece. And then, with our own currency, I'm going to start infrastructure projects up and down Greece all over the country and I'm going to get people back to work. It's going to be very, very difficult early on. There'll be a lot of external pressure. There'll be serious pressure on us, but we can do it together. That's what I would have done, Dimitris. That's what I would have done. I doubt it ever even occurred to him or to any of his cabinet. Let's just be done with this once and for all. Let's be done with them. And you know, I was thinking today, just before you come back in, where is the opposition to this madness in Greece now? I've been reading press releases by New Democracy and trying to figure out, is anybody in Greece?
They are the parties who have preceded
Got you in the mess. Yeah.
So I mean, they have done their time of service to the Troika masters. So I mean, they don't have any ground of opposition to stand on, right? All they are saying is that they go to Merkel and say, we'll do it better. But Merkel doesn't believe that because she knows that Tsipras is the only one that controls, organized labor, the unions, sections of the middle class, public employees and functionaries, people who have in general not suffered as much as the majority of Greeks during the past 8 years. So I think that there is no opposition, but there is a wave of discontent among the populace, which everybody fears. So they say, right, okay, Tsipras is there, let him do the dirty work as long as it lasts, because otherwise we'll all be hanged, right? Because if this pressure, even if it's not an organized pressure, an organized resistance or opposition to the government, it can still be felt in very negative attitudes of the Greeks, both towards Europe and towards the present government and its predecessors, of course.
And its predecessors, yeah.
So it's a situation where I would agree with you. If Tsipras was not Tsipras and Varoufakis was not Varoufakis, that is, both of them compromised and committed and dependent on the European bondage of Greece, right? Of course, they would have acted the way you said, but I would even go further than that and say that things might not be as bad as one could hypothesize, because you could now negotiate with the EU and say, look, if you want to hope to get a portion of your debt, of our debt back, and if you want to not have a disaster of incredible proportions in the Balkans, you have to help us adjust to the new currency in the best way we can. You can use your quantitative easing to allow us to move from the euro to the drachma, not from one to the next, but say in 6 months, a year. The same way you would have to now negotiate with Britain about an exit from the European Union, which is a much simpler procedure, actually, than an exit from a currency which you don't have, right, which you don't control, and into a new currency that you don't have. I mean, this has never happened in the past. That's why people are afraid, but they don't see the positive side of that. If they were determined politically to back up this position with resolve and determination on the part of their leaders.
Yeah, but it's game over for the central banks.
Lacking that, I mean, I don't see at the moment Greece being able to move independently. Most of the Greek people I've spoken to and I speak are hopeful that sooner or later Europe, the Eurozone, will disintegrate. Already they're talking about a multi-tier Eurozone, which is basically some kind of double currencies in the different countries that cannot adjust properly to the euro. And so, I mean, there would have to be a transition into a smaller Central European Eurozone, and the rest of the periphery going back to their original currencies. But of course, there are so many variables and so much volatility at the moment on a global scale, since the globalists had different plans. I mean, this is something that nobody can deny now. I mean, what has happened with Brexit and then with Trump is not something they wanted, and is not something that they had planned for.
They didn't expect.
That's why you see all this to and fro. You know, the judges, the House of Lords, this, that, or the other. They're using all these institutions. Nobody has explained, however, why the Queen of England has made such a definite intervention in favor of Brexit in the last week ahead of the referendum. Why? Because obviously there is some fraction within the globalist pyramid, which says, look, maybe we should take a few steps back. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Rothschilds are also in the same.
That's brilliant. Do you know what, Dimitris? That thought has not occurred to me, that the organisation and the forces behind it might actually have thought, let's just roll back a little bit, hold back a little bit, because we have revealed what we are too much. We need to maybe hold back a bit. Now on that, because we've got just under 10 minutes left, and I don't want to miss the opportunity. You mentioned earlier on, and you mentioned to me today, about the movement against the European Union in Holland and in France. How serious is that, do you think, for the cabal, for the globalists? I know that Marine Le Pen is getting attacked from all sides by everybody. There's talk of the Russians snooping on Emmanuel Macron. No proof of that, of course. How much should we take seriously what's going on in France and Holland? And could we see a Frexit, and I don't know what they're calling the Dutch exit?
That's the big surprise that the globalists didn't expect. Having crushed the left, having won such a humiliating capitulation from Tsipras, they thought the sky's the limit for them. And that's where they started making the big mistakes. Soros, Merkel, Hillary, Obama, they went on too far with their plan to change the population of Europe and to introduce an element of Islamization within it that would disintegrate the components that hold the nation states together, you see. They had this plan which dates back in 1925. There is the man was called the Prince Coudenhove Kalergi, who had this vision of Europe being mixed with different races, as he called them, because he was a racist at the time, right? And thus downgrading the European element of their culture so that they would be more amenable to globalization, to the destruction of nation states and the elimination of borders. Now that plan is definitely part of the globalist plan, at least for Europe. But I think that Soros, who is the main organizing mind, he with his network of NGOs, he managed to organize an impressive system of logistics, almost like a sort of parallel tourism or black tourism or poor man's tourism, right? Where leaflets were disseminated in the most distant parts of the world saying that Europe is waiting for you with the blonde women with open arms to welcome you, etc., etc. This was a massive operation. People don't talk about it, but that's the truth of the matter. We in Greece, having had the additional burden of siphoning thousands and hundreds of thousands of refugees into Northern Europe through our mainland, I mean, we know what problem this may cause, and we still don't know if we can survive. If the Greek population that used to be 98% Greek, one of the most homogeneous countries in the post-war era, right? If it can survive this influx of people from different cultures, different values, and to be able to assimilate in our society, especially given that our society cannot offer the kinds of things that Germany and the Holland can still offer, or France. But you see, in France, the situation is out of control in terms of the, the districts around Paris and the main cities. You have the ghettos erupting in violence, phenomena that are in a very late stage of disintegration and social upheaval, which I think Le Pen says that she can handle them. Because, Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, the leader of the Soviet revolution, said that, if the stick is too much turning towards one direction, you have to shift it very forcefully on the other to the other direction until it becomes upright again. So really, to stop this disintegration of Europe, you can't do it with little fig leaves or cosmetics like the ones that Soros and Varoufakis are proposing. I mean, you need to introduce law and order where in countries where Sharia law is enforced in parallel to the national law. This is unheard of. We have the same thing in Greece, in the area of Thrace, where, they're Muslims, they're supposed to be Muslims, they're all turned into Turks, they're all following the Sharia and the orders of the Mufti, the Grand Mufti of the Muslim communities in Thrace, and they are a state within a state. And that's what, unfortunately, that's what the Islamic movement wants to have. It's not just Islamic extremists, it's the Islamic political ideology, the Ummah, the global community of Muslims that must prevail in the world. And this cannot be appeased or accommodated the way some people, some liberal people, humanistic people, nobody doubts that, hoped to achieve.
It can't be. It just causes chaos.
It doesn't work.
No. And it was never meant to work.
These people are following very precise instructions that are inscribed in their holy books. Very difficult to change. If you ask any, you're in Manchester, I suppose, and I don't know what sort of Muslim communities you may have there. But if
there's
you go
a very
into
big Muslim population here.
Any moderate community of Muslims, and tell them, do you prefer Sharia law or the law of the land, in England? If he's honest, he's going to tell you Sharia is the law of the Allah,
I don't know about that, Dimitris. It's an interesting one because Manchester does have a huge Asian population, and the vast majority of them, and I live right in the heart of South Manchester near the famous Curry Mile in Rusholme, huge Sikh, Sikhs are completely different, but huge Pakistani and Bangladeshi and Sri Lankan population here. The vast majority of them, I think, would be, I wouldn't say they're lapsed Muslims, like lapsed Catholics, but I don't see too many people taking it that seriously. But I think most
of the people who are lapsed Muslims, as you call them, are okay.
Yeah.
They can be assimilated, and they're nice people, they're good people,
but there's always the
generous, kind, etc. But if they are infiltrated and come under the control of some kind of a, Islamic religious community, then they're lost.
And you can have trouble. Dimitris, we're going to have to leave it there because we're way over the time, my friend. We're right up on time. I've got to put a stop to it there because I'm over the time. I'm over the hour. I want to thank you for coming back on again. This is vital stuff. I'm going to get this on podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Not at all. And we'll be inviting you back again real soon. We'll get this on YouTube. Every country in Europe needs to listen to people like Dimitris Yannopoulos, because this is the reality of what's facing your country inside the European Union. Mate, thanks for coming back on.
Thank you for having me.
And come back anytime you want, Dimitris. Thanks again.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Terrific to have Dimitris Yannopoulos on the line to us there from Greece. He was the Greek Finance Ministry spokesman working for Yanis Varoufakis there, telling it the way it is. You know, telling it the way it is. And the reality is that Greece is a test tube. It's a laboratory experiment. It really is. Destroyed the country financially. Take everything. Look what the European Central Bank has done to Greece. It knew Greece could never earn the money that was required to pay the alleged debt to the institutions, the ECB and the IMF, because it didn't want the money. It wanted Greece's islands. It wanted the Parthenon. It wanted Greece's land. It wanted its gas rights in the Aegean. It wanted Greece's radio stations and TV stations. It wanted Greece's roads. Its toll roads are now owned by companies in Germany. Coming soon to a country near you in the Eurozone if your country doesn't get the hell out of the European Union. It's as simple as that. And Dimitris said to me earlier on, he said, Richie, when we were talking today, you couldn't even find the words, even in my native tongue, to describe the misery that exists in Greece at the moment. And then add into that the massive flow of migrants from North Africa, from the Middle East, and it's just chaos. It's bedlam. And you have a prime minister who told the Greek people in 2015 to vote no to the terms offered by the Troika. 62% of the Greeks voted no. And Tsipras and Varoufakis, the motherless traitors that they are, went and signed the deal anyway. My scenario that I put to Dimitris, and he's an economist, I'm not, and he agreed with every word of it. Tsipras should have phoned Merkel and said, Zik Verlassen, fuck off. He should have then phoned the mint and said, get me some drachma, get me some notes and get me some coins. He should have then went to the Greek people, hand on his heart, and said, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're breaking away from it. It's madness. We're now going to not flood in a irresponsible way, but we're going to put our own currency back into circulation. We are going to print money and we are going to use that to develop the country's infrastructure and to build factories. And we're going to put a shitload of you back to work, and you're going to spend that money in your own communities. No economist in the world can find a flaw with that basic plan. 3 steps. Merkel go and do one. Print the drachma. Start building stuff. Simple as that.